Okay, thank you. Anything I say, I have documentary evidence for. I can't bring it all here. I've used 1,700 papers. Between 1949 and 1962, everything we needed to know about microwaves was known and published. By 1962, all of the dangers, all of the hazards, everything was known. And when I say all of them, between the superpowers and us, the brain at that time had been studied for brain waves, and microwaves could be used to penetrate the brain and cause behavioral changes. And by 1962, with the resonance frequencies of the organs and the brain, the cyclotronic resonance frequencies, circadian resonance frequencies, a statement was made in 1962 by the governments that birth defects, all birth defects, organs, whole organisms, all cells, brain function, all emotions, all moods could be altered, changed, and destroyed by 1962. Microwaves then, as now, were used as stealth weapons before they became cell phones. In 1965, the use of cell phones by the military was used. I had them. By 1965, the prospect of cell phones and everything from cell phones was seen as a really, really lucrative market for the general public. And knowing the dangers that cell phones could cause, the military and the industry of several countries, the United States, Canada, us, some of the NATO countries, Australia and New Zealand, the people got together and they knew that cell phones and all the other gadgets you have today, they knew they would not be allowed under the current safety limits. And we needed a safety limit that could never be taken to court and never challenged if these things were to progress. And in 1965, they adopted an old 1953 thermal level by an engineer by the name of Schwann. And in order to prevent being taken to court, the industries and the people who make the decisions, they adopted the Schwann 1953 level, which basically says if a certain weight of your tissue, either 10 grams or a kilogram, depending which way you are going, does not heat up by a certain temperature in 6 minutes, then everything will be deemed safe for a lifetime's exposure for adults, women, children, pregnant women, everybody. And the 6-minute thermal level is the one that is still used today. They totally ignored and put aside the electromagnetic vectors of the wave and the harm that the electromagnetic vectors can do. Oh, it's my stick, it's all right. Sorry. Thank you very much, thanks. They put aside all of the harm from the electric and magnetic vectors, so I don't knock it over again. Now, they interfere with the electrical conductivity of the cells, the electrical conductivity of the neurons, the electrical conductivity of the brain. They interfere with the resonant frequency of the circadian resonant cells, the cyclotronic ions. In fact, they interfere with everything. So all of those are brushed aside, and we stuck with the 6-minute thermal limit. Sometimes they extend it to 30 minutes, but basically it is a 6-minute, and that is what is in force today in 42% of the planet of what we are in that part today. That comes from the International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, who advise what was the government scientists, now Public Health England, who advise government, who advise councils, and it comes all the way down, and it is still in force today. In 1971, cancer was proven to be caused by low-level microwave radiation and has been kept secret ever since, along with all of the other illnesses and diseases. In the early 70s, this document was published. It was by the American military. It is top secret, classified top secret. And it lists 2,000 research papers, 2,000, and each of those took many, many years to construct. 2,000 research papers, because in those days the military did the research with the universities. And it covers all of the illnesses which you can expect to get and die from continuous low-level radiation. This, I think, is the most shameful document ever to be published. It is by the World Health Organization. We pay them to protect us, and we trust them to protect us. In 1973, the World Health Organization had a conference in Warsaw, Biological Effects and Health Hazards of Microwave Radiation, Below Thermal Radiation, which is what you have on your cell phones. 350 pages documenting harm to the ordinary person. 107 different chapters. Chapter 40 deals with cancer, I think 28 reproductive faults. But instead of telling the world, I don't know who made them make the decision, instead of telling the world, it was stamped top secret with a big red top secret stamp. It still is. And you still will not be told about this. They will not admit to it, even today. The second most shameful document, I think, is this one. This was published between 1972 and 1976. The final part was 1976. It is from the US Defense Intelligence Agency. And the document says, if the more advanced nations of the West, which is us, are strict in the enforcement of exposure standards, there could be unfavorable effects on industrial output. Industrial output is profit, and military function. In other words, what they wanted us to do was set a level of radiation for the NATO countries set a level of radiation that would not be strict. Hence, we came in with the 6-minute thermal level that is still in place today and what councils are advised to adhere to. The World Health Organization, again, what they didn't tell you, on their website, or on their, what they had on these days, 80% of the published papers linked cancer to low-level microwaves. And the others, you had neurological damage, birth defects. There was no secret among the decision makers then. This is the original, or a copy of the original International Commission document, and it is of interest to decision makers, all decision makers, and this is for council decision makers and all other decision makers. They actually say in this that their recommendations are guidelines. They are not law. You do not have to adhere to them. They are guidelines. They say they only consider involving the heating of tissue. They go on to say, for example, children, the elderly, and some chronically ill people may have a lower tolerance for one or more forms of these microwaves than the rest of your population. They will be deemed sensitive. Good news here. The industry themselves, come on Barry, sort yourself out. The industry themselves in the year 2000 studied the top 220 research articles and said that what they are putting out actually does cause cancer. The Council of Europe, 47 countries, 800 million people. Simple statement, ban Wi-Fi in schools. Dr. Annie Sasko, 22 years World Health Organization Cancer Department. Mobiles, cell phones and Wi-Fi will cause cancer. Switzerland, France, Germany, Belgium, England, this is not the state schools, England have started to remove Wi-Fi from schools. UNICEF, the big children's charity who care for children, decided to look into this, and they did their own study, nobody interfered, and they came up with their own conclusion. They found there was an 85% risk of brain and heart damage. And in fact, in Canada, I think it is, in the schools, they've had heart attacks from children from Wi-Fi, and now the classrooms have defibrillators in. 85% brain and heart damage, 36% epilepsy, 11% neurological harm, 82% blood, immune and fetal damage. And they are chemically and physically addictive. And I have articles from Scientific American Mind that show that children will demonstrate severe aggression. But there is a solution, but the problem with the solution, and we go right back to the very first document, you will lose profit. And this really all comes down to money.